everyone. Okay, it has been an absolutely crazy day in Texas and a crazy few days in Texas. We have a lot to talk about on this front. Many of you will remember that I did a broadcast last week on this issue of Texas versus California and how all of this was shaking out. There's been quite a few new developments on this in the last couple of days, including now the issuance of civil arrest warrants for Democrats who have fled the state. So more on that in a minute. And we have a lot of other stuff to talk about in the context of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Epstein and lots of other things. Okay. For those of you who are new here, I'm Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer. Now I work exclusively with folks who are trying to make as big an impact as possible for good. I work on everything from tiny little campaigns all the way up to races for the U.S. Senate and the House. And I consult with folks like yourself who are out here trying to make a legacy level impact for future generations right now. Good stuff. Okay, for our visually challenged viewers today, I'm wearing a sleeveless knit top that is cream colored. My hair is down. I'm a pink skinned, green eyed, dirty blonde haired woman. And my hair is down. I already said that. And I'm in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart. And I'm coming to you as always from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohegan land. Okay, so when we last left this issue of Texas redistricting, Gavin Newsom was threatening to redistrict California if Texas pulled the trigger and decided to redistrict mid-cycle. So here's what Texas has proposed to do, just so everybody understands. Essentially, what Texas has proposed to do is to create 5 new Republican supermajority districts that will essentially guarantee that the Republicans keep the House of Representatives in 2026, or at least that's what they're trying to do. They're essentially trying to make it impossible for Democrats to get elected in those jurisdictions. Now, the broadcast I did last week, we went through all the ways in which gerrymandering can work: racist gerrymandering, political gerrymandering, what's legal and what's not, and the means by which the Texas legislature is trying to get this done. Okay, so over the weekend, Democrats in the Texas House fled the state. The reason for this is that a quorum cannot be established to vote on the redistricting bill unless Texas Democrats who are elected to the House of Representatives are present in the state. So these Texas Democrats fled to Illinois, New York, and Massachusetts. The reason for choosing those states, very significant, is that they do not have a cooperating governor. In other words, J.B. Pritzker, Maura Healey, and Kathy Hochul are not going to cooperate with law enforcement from Texas to try to return these people to the state of Texas to satisfy the requirements of a quorum. So in the interim, what the Texas House has done is voted to issue civil arrest warrants. Now, I need to make something very clear on this, just so everybody understands, all right? These are not, there is no allegation that the Texas Democrats have broken any Texas criminal or civil law. The civil arrest warrants are essentially equivalent to a subpoena, but they do empower the Texas National Guard, not the Texas National Guard, the Texas State Police to return, not from other states, but from other locations, these individuals to the Texas House if they are within the jurisdiction of Texas. As long as they're outside of Texas, the Texas law enforcement officials do not have jurisdiction. Okay, they can't reach into Illinois and bring these people back. But under the civil arrest warrants that have now been issued, again, reminder, these are kind of like subpoenas, which can compel you to appear. If the individual Democrats return to the state of Texas, Texas law enforcement can pick them up and bring them to the state capitol. This is crazy. I mean, I just want everybody to understand how crazy this is. And the overarching thing that I want everyone to understand here is that the big picture that's being missed here is that what the Texas GOP is signaling is that unless they violently redistrict the state, they can't win the House of Representatives in 2026. That is essentially what the GOP, through the Texas GOP, is fundamentally admitting. That if they don't do this, chances are very high that they're going to lose the House of Representatives. And the reason why they don't want to do that is because once Democrats take back the House, impeachment, at least through the House of Representatives, becomes possible. All committees flip back to the control of the Democrats. That allows huge overarching investigations to take place. It essentially stops the Trump agenda in its tracks because no bill can pass the House if there's a Democratic majority and all the Dems stick together. So they know, the GOP knows, and the Texas GOP is doing the bidding of the national GOP, that this is like a do or die moment. Now, as we discussed last week, while this was all initially unfolding, Gavin Newsom was like, we're going scorched earth. And if Texas pulls this off, we will do a mid-cycle redistricting in California that will guarantee that essentially no Republican can be elected in the state of California. Okay, I told you guys last week that I'm all in favor of this. And I think that part of what is wrong about this moment fundamentally is that Democrats have been unwilling to fight fire with fire. I personally am in favor, not just of like redistricting California so that all of those seats go blue, but in favor of other states that are also saying the same thing. Kathy Hochul has explicitly said that this will be a part of her plan. There's a bill already pending right now in the California state legislature that says if Texas does this, it pulls the trigger on redistricting in California. Yes, there is one Republican rep in California that's trying to stop this. He is wildly outnumbered. Like, there's not a chance in hell that that bill to stop this is going to pass in California. So we're in a situation now where like the Texas GOP is playing with fire, not only because they are threatening to literally like civilly arrest their colleagues and forcibly return them to the state house if they enter the state of Texas, but also because if they actually manage to succeed in doing this, the whole map of the United States in Democratic controlled states is potentially up for grabs. Now, again, I have to remind you all, the way that redistricting is handled is on a state-by-state basis. So it does require state legislation and also a willingness, a political willingness to play hardball. But I have to say that given what we're up against, and again, like, may I remind you that we are currently living in an autocratic fascist regime, not descending into it. You know, Rachel made the same point last night, not like on the slippery slope to it, like we're actually living in it. And you either have to kind of like address that in real terms and stop playing nice in terms of like how you respond to these kind of attempts to fundamentally steal the government, or you have to be prepared to kind of like lose this nation forever. That's kind of like what it comes down to. Seriously, like we are in a position now where if this kind of action isn't taken in terms of a willingness to redistrict blue states, all bets are off. Because, you know, like, does anybody really want to live through 3.5 more years of this? I know I don't. The way out of that is to take back the House, which again, if Texas gets away with this, will be very, very difficult because they can't win unless they cheat, but they're willing to cheat to do it. So it's like scorched earth from here on out, as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, the redistricting has to take place. Now, somebody asked a question this morning on the Patreon feed. Reminder, you want to ask me questions, you can drop into our subscriptions over on patreon.com/resistancelive for as little as $5 a month. You get to ask questions before every broadcast, and I will answer them on the air or in writing if I can't get to them live. One of the things to recognize about this is that this is not easy for Texas legislators. So somebody asked on the Patreon feed, isn't it hard for them to stay out of state? Yes, Texas elected officials are not very well paid. And on top of that, since the last time this happened, because this is not the first time that Texas has tried some nonsense, back in 2021, there was not a redistricting effort undertaken, but a voter suppression effort undertaken by the Texas GOP. And the Texas Democrats left the state then too. And eventually that effort by the Texas GOP failed. But the Texas GOP wasn't done because they didn't like the fact that Democratic lawmakers fled the state and therefore they couldn't carry out their fascist agenda. So what they did was they passed a law that says that every single day that you remain out of state to break a quorum, you are personally, not through campaign funds, personally fined $500. So the longer this goes on, the more usurious, to use a legal term, this becomes to Democratic lawmakers. Now, granted, they can personally raise those funds. They can't do it through campaigning. And the bill that passed the Texas legislature on this front has never been tested in court. Okay, so we don't know if it's going to hold up. But the Texas GOP has made this very, very difficult because they're essentially trying to control in every way possible how voting is conducted inside Texas, to the point that Democrats have literally no power. And so from this standpoint, it's very important that the Democratic Texas electeds stay out of state. Beto O'Rourke is fundraising to assist them with these fines in the event that they do end up needing to pay them. But I will tell you, I expect that there will be a court challenge to this in the event that they are assessed. And in the interim, we have to get behind the Democratic governors who are like, nope, not going to let this happen. It's time to play hardball. So that's what's happening in Texas. Truly, it's chaotic. It's emblematic of these times. But also, I really don't want anybody to miss the big picture here, which is that this is what they are having to do to maintain power. They're having to actively cheat, threaten their colleagues with arrest. Like, they know they can't win unless they do this kind of stuff. And that in and of itself is a sign of where we are. Okay. Speaking of which, I want to talk about something that happened in Nebraska yesterday. Nebraska. Okay. Representative Mike Flood held a town hall in Nebraska yesterday. And if you have not seen the footage from this town hall, I strongly encourage you to go seek it out because people are mad, like pull no punches, angry in Nebraska. Something very similar, by the way, happened yesterday in a Republican district in Pennsylvania where there was another town hall where people lost it. So in Nebraska, here's what happened. Mike Flood shows up for this town hall and there's a line around the block. Not a few people showing up for a town hall with their a Republican rep, a line around the block. And people are screaming questions at him about it's costing you $800 million a day to fund ICE. How much are taxpayers supposed to be expected to pay to fund fascism? Why are we expected to fund a fascist state? In Nebraska. He also pulled something else where he tried to say something along the lines of, do we really think a 28-year-old able-bodied man who isn't working deserves health care? And the entire audience was like, yes! Things are getting very rowdy in some red states. And frankly, I want everyone to be aware that this is also a sign of where we are. We are being ruled right now by a fascist minority, right? The vast majority of people in this country do not support what is happening. Another sign of this, by the way, in case you were wondering, there was a poll that came out yesterday from YouGov about how many people based on party affiliation want the Epstein files released. You know what those numbers are? They're above 80% across every party affiliation. Republicans, independents, it's 93% for Democrats. But even the hardest core of the hardcore Republicans are above 80% on wanting the Epstein files released. Things are changing very rapidly in this country. And, one of the things that I want everybody to remember on those days where it feels like it's so overwhelming and, where it's just bad news upon bad news upon bad news. Believe me, I get it. I had this over the weekend. I had to check out for 2 days from the news because I was having a rough time myself. And, this is part of what I do for a living. I will tell you all that when you look at what is happening with actual human beings in this country, voters, okay, what is happening is that people are really, really upset. And that includes, by the way, his own base. There's a tiny fraction that's going to be behind him no matter what, because it's a cult. But there is a shattering happening right now, as we talked about on multiple broadcasts last week, over the Epstein issue that is causing real fractures in the underlying voting base of the Republican Party right now. And that includes, by the way, in the influencers and bro podcasters out there who are on the far right. So, again, this is your reminder that, there is an enormous amount of people power coming together right now in various ways. You don't have to agree with everybody 100% of the time. You don't even have to agree with people 15% of the time to work with them. The only people you can't work with are the really hardcore fascists who are not abandoning the party. But everybody else, we have work to do, right? And, the thing I want everybody to remember here is that there's a tremendous need to see the opportunities in this moment, right? Because they are clinging to power by cheating and by the skin of their teeth. And the longer that this goes on and the more outraged people become by their neighbors getting kidnapped by ICE and by the Epstein files not being released, and by the end of their social security and social safety net benefits that people rely on, in states where 20% of the people are on food stamps, the greater opportunity there is to truly organize and get things done. All right. So all that said, I have to talk about Epstein for a couple minutes here, which, we're talking about all the time. Somebody on the Patreon feed this morning was like, talk me off a ledge because I think we're not talking about Epstein anymore. No. And I'm not meaning to be mean about that. I just mean that there's literally breaking news about Epstein every hour right now. So I'm not sure what that person is watching, but there's breaking news as of this morning. All right. So this morning, there is news leaking out of the DOJ, allegedly, that they're considering releasing the transcript of Todd Blanche's interview with Ghislaine Maxwell last week. I have to warn you all on this. This is another part of the cover-up. I want everybody to be really clear on this because Todd Blanche did not allow FBI agents to be present inside that interview. And one of the things that is possible is that he didn't ask a single question about Donald Trump. Right? He may have gone in there with this list of potentially 100 people, all of whom are Democrats, and only asked about them. So, yes, I suppose we should see the transcript, but it's not a substitute for the Epstein files, right? And let me just say one other thing. They're still doing everything that they can think of to distract from this. Did you guys see the breaking news that now NASA under Sean Duffy wants to put a nuclear reactor on the moon? On the moon! On the moon! Why? Why is there any need for nuclear power on the moon? It's crazy pants. This is exactly the thing that they are doing over and over again. And the attempts to distract are getting wilder and wilder and wilder. I mean, I saw that one last night before I was going to bed and I was like, Jesus Christ, just release the Epstein files. This is insane. It's so obvious what they're trying to do here, okay? And it's because it's not going away. It's not going away. And again, at these Republican town halls, Republican reps are being asked about the Epstein files over and over and over again. This issue is not gone. It's not going anywhere. Okay. All that said, I have to issue one slight word of warning here because I have said to all of you repeatedly that it's really important that we rely on evidence when it comes to what's happening in the Epstein related cases. Okay. In relation to the Epstein files. Okay, so I know that there is an allegation out there that is very violent that asserts that Trump assaulted a 13-year-old girl. I just want to warn you all about this because this series of allegations pops up over and over and over again whenever Epstein's name comes up. There are very serious problems with that case in particular in the context of credibility and reliability. And I don't want to go into it in great detail, but what I want to say to you all is this, okay? What is in the Epstein files is enough. This is all I have to say about it. It's clearly so bad that they are going to extreme lengths to cover it up nonstop. Okay. And one of the things that's really important to me as an attorney is that we look for evidence that is admissible in court from reliable witnesses. All right. And if allegations related to this particular girl are in the Epstein files and there is court admissible evidence there related to it, awesome. But everybody who's been looking at this case for a very long time has questions about that particular set of allegations. And I'm mentioning this because it came up in the comments and because it's also not consistent in the context of the testimony from other victims of Epstein, of how Epstein and his friends went about this. Okay. So again, one of the things that I want everyone to be very mindful of here is that there are real needs right now to be careful and cautious about not taking anything outside the scope of what is actually admissible evidence as fact. Okay. And I will freely admit, interviews with witnesses that are taken under oath by a law enforcement official that meet the requirements of the federal rules of evidence are admissible in court. Okay. Other things, right, are not. And, we have to keep in mind here that, there are limited circumstances in which, for instance, an interview given to a media figure might potentially be admissible, but it's not as good as somebody showing up and testifying, right? And in certain instances, it can be deemed hearsay, dependent on how the federal rules of evidence are applied. So we've got to be really cautious right now about what we take as fact. And this is one reason why last week I was like, please let's not speculate about Epstein and boys. There's no evidence of that. Please let's not speculate about X, Y, and Z. where there's no evidence of it. Let's like do the thing that like is necessary and demand the release of the Epstein files. Like that's really it. Okay. And again, I want to warn you all that I will approach the release of any transcript from this interview with Todd Blanche with about 1,000 grains of salt, because my expectation is that it is a part of the cover up, not they would not be releasing it if it wasn't, right? They're not going to release an interview where Maxwell has said, I saw Trump assaulting teenagers 16 times. Okay. Like they're not going to release an interview that says that. So keep in mind that, you know, the way in which all of this shakes out is reliant on the origination of the evidence, right? Like I don't trust Todd Blanche. No one has any reason to trust Todd Blanche, or for that matter, the DOJ and Pam Bondi. So if they're releasing something related to Epstein, you should expect that it is designed and being released for political purposes to run cover for Trump. All right. So be very cautious. Be very cautious. And, you know, the other thing I just want to say here, because it's worth saying, is that while I appreciate the guilt by association when it comes to kind of like the nation's most notorious sex trafficker of the modern era, I also want to remind people that evidence of sexual assault is different from evidence of grabbing a ride on a private jet. And one of the things that we need to be really cautious about here is what evidence exists with regard to individuals. Because the other thing I will tell you here is that, you know, it may be that Todd Blanche asked Maxwell about whether or not she'd ever seen Bill Clinton on the jet. We already know Bill Clinton was on the jet, right? But we don't know as fact, because there's no evidence of it yet. And if there is, damn him to hell, that there's proof that he was engaged in assaulting teenagers. Okay. So again, you got to be really, really careful and cautious around this stuff in terms of like actual admissible evidence of crimes. Okay. That's all I want to say about it. And I'm not running cover for anybody. You know, you all know I've been very clear about this. Whoever's in the files, if that evidence shows that they are guilty of sex trafficking and child rape, they should burn in hell. But I'm going to tell you also right now that one of the things that I'm expecting is going to happen is that they are going to seek to tar Democrats with all of this while letting Trump off the hook. And we have to be prepared for that. Okay. So yeah, so that's that. All right. Over the weekend, Trump fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because he didn't like the jobs numbers that came out on Friday. And, you know, as has been the case since January, every time something like this happens, people are like, oh my God, Wall Street isn't going to stand for it. I mean, yes, the markets have plummeted. They plummeted on Friday. And yet, you know, nonetheless, trading is still actively ongoing for the last 2 days. I will just tell you that I think that what this particular firing has done is it has made any data coming out of this administration unreliable. And I mean that not just in terms of jobs data, I mean it in terms of like everything. We already knew that they were wiping the slate through the FDA, through to the CDC on, like, for instance, COVID numbers, right? We've known for a long time that, you know, active data since January has been wiped off of websites, manipulated. You know, there were efforts undertaken in the first few weeks of the administration to download data that was available off of the CDC website and off of NIH, because it was clear that they were undertaking attempts to just like wipe the slate of data that they didn't like. This is the latest example, but it does, of course, have a really serious impact potentially on the economy. Because if we don't know whether or not the jobs numbers are reliable, we're lacking accurate indicators of where the economy is and where it's going. Okay. And that's actually very dangerous in a lot of ways, because what it means is that if our economy is not as stable as they claim it is, if like many, many more people are out of work than they're willing to admit, that means a lot of things in terms of like purchasing power and economic stability and consumer confidence and other things that like now apparently we're not going to get on any reliable basis. So, you know, all of this, as I said on Friday when the numbers came out and Trump was losing his mind, is very reminiscent of the like, let me just not add these COVID numbers to the current stats at the beginning of the pandemic, because if I don't add the numbers, the cases don't exist. Very similar kind of situation. I'm just going to remind you all, like, yes, this is a very big issue for the government writ large, but also this is very classic malignant narcissism, right? Proof that I'm not adequate, proof that I can't do my job, proof that I'm failing, poof, gone. Therefore, nobody can claim that I'm not good at what I'm doing. It's exactly kind of standard malignant narcissist stuff, right? Also very common in this, which is, also happening in this situation, is you say something about me I don't like, or you come up with evidence that I've done something that's not 100% wonderful. You're to blame for that, not reality, right? So he's firing her in part so that there isn't, it's all her fault. She's reporting things inaccurately, not that like he's failed and the economy is failing because all of his policies have sucked. So again, keep in mind in this regard that, we don't know how this one is totally going to shake out, but this one is particularly dangerous for the economy. And I'm going to be watching, obviously, as we all will be, to see what happens next. Okay. Final issue that I wanted to address today very briefly was that we had a comment on the Patreon feed this morning that raised some eyebrows for me. And that I wanted to just come on here and talk for a second about the importance of, I don't want to say doing your own research, because that lingo is so coded right now for, people doing their own research on the COVID vaccine and therefore not taking it. But the importance of really building out reliable sources for news and information right now, so that if you get caught in a conversation with somebody who claims that something isn't true, you've got evidence to back up your position. So the question that I was asked this morning, which was worded a little funny, and I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt, but essentially the question was, if I don't have any evidence that what's happening inside detention centers is cruel, what is my objection to them? And, I read that question and I thought, how could you not have evidence that what's happening inside these detention centers is cruel? And then it made me think, well, if you're not paying attention to reliable news sources, you're not following Maxwell Frost, for instance. You're not following Migrant Watch, which is a Substack that is reporting on a daily basis about what's happening inside detention facilities and what's happening in the context of ICE kidnapping people. Maybe you're not following folks who are doing immigration rights work. Maybe you just don't realize, you don't have the information or the facts available to you, that what is happening inside detention camps inside the United States right now is literally torture. Like, it meets the definition under UN charters for inhumane crimes against humanity. Okay. They are cramming people into rooms with open toilets. They are, in some instances, only providing people with very limited opportunities to wash. In some of these detention centers, they're only feeding people once a day, and the food is infested with bugs. Lack of clean drinking water has been reported in multiple detention camps. Okay. So nobody should be walking around thinking that what's happening inside these detention camps is not cruel. And in fact, we have witnesses, people who actually have managed to get past the ICE defense network that's trying to keep electeds from doing their jobs and overseeing what's happening in these facilities. When people have actually been able to get in, right? Maxwell Frost got into the Everglades concentration camp. You should go watch what he said about what he saw. About, half naked men being detained, some of whom are US citizens, chanting about the conditions that they are in, chanting for their liberty. Right? Like, detainees are not standing in yards of American concentration camps writing out with their bodies SOS because nothing bad is happening there. So it's critically important that you are intentionally choosing where to get your information these days, okay? Because there is no doubt, if you are following actual factual reporting on what's going on inside the camps, that what's happening inside them without question meets the definition of cruel and unusual punishment. And many of these people, by the way, because cruel and unusual punishment usually only applies if you've been convicted of a crime, have never even been accused of a crime. Because I'm going to remind you, being in the United States as an undocumented person is not a crime. It's a civil violation. So we have to be very mindful about where we're sourcing our information in this era. And, one of the things that I will also just say about this is that I get asked frequently on social media and elsewhere to do the work of media literacy for individuals. And this is one reason why I think it's really important for people to be media literate on your own, okay? Because it doesn't take much more, honestly, than a solid Google search to find the information that I'm talking about. And if you have questions about how to respond to someone saying, that's not true, nothing bad is happening inside those camps, you should get on Google and look it up. Is what's happening inside detention camps cruel? What's happening inside detention camps according to Democratic electeds who've been inside it? Run searches like that. See what comes up. And just also know that you have to check your sources, because if it's coming out of Fox News, it's going to be a hell of a lot less reliable than if it's coming out of, say, like MSNBC, or for that matter, The Nation. So again, it's really critically important that you are building your own skill set, like building those muscles of getting your information from places that are reliable and doing your own fact checking. And yes, I'm happy to come on the broadcast, as I have been now for like 8.5 years, and dispel rumors, address things that people have heard from their neighbors. But also, I really want this audience to be empowered to do that work themselves, because I can't do it for everyone. Nobody can, right? But also because it's really fundamentally important, given what's happening with disinformation under this regime, that you know who you can trust. And, it's one reason why, I come on here, and I'm not perfect. Every once in a while I make a mistake, but I come on here every day having researched everything that I'm talking about. And I do my level best to provide you with truthful and factual information out of every single thing that I say. And that's because I want you all to be able to rely on me. But there's plenty of folks I also rely on, right? For information, for analysis, for facts. And we all have to be choosing right now to take proactive action on finding out the truth of the matter, right? Because it's really easy, just, in response to this particular question, to find information, statements, testimony, interviews with people who have been inside these camps about what's actually happening on the inside. And, once you read 2 or 3 of them, you're not going to have any question any longer about whether or not what's happening inside is cruel. None. And, if you still happen to have that, I will just point out that, rounding up people of a given ethnicity and putting them in camps also is considered forcible displacement, is considered to meet the definition of genocide under the UN Charter. Okay? If you purposefully round up people and force them into detention camps, you are on the pathway to genocide. Full stop. Okay? So there shouldn't be any doubt here about any of this. And I'm using this as an example, by the way, because I want people to be thinking about this with regard to other issues, right? Again, I'm going to point out, because somebody mentioned it, Daily Costs, which somebody already mentioned in the chat here, is just an aggregator site. What they do in most instances, occasionally they have their own independent reporting, but most of the time what they do is they just troll social media and post a bunch of posts that other people have said. That doesn't make those posts any more reliable if you don't know where they're coming from. Okay, so again, there's a real need right now to be media literate about where you're getting your information, whether or not you can trust the sources, diving deep into who's reporting on it. Is the reporter reliable, or do they have a conservative bent? That's really easy to figure out by Googling or just clicking on the link of other things they've written about. All of this is really critically important right now, maybe more important than it's ever been, because there's an enormous amount of disinformation floating around out there. If you happen to share a household with somebody who watches Fox News, you're being exposed to disinformation on a daily basis. It's like secondhand smoke. And even if you're not, if you come across a neighbor who's like, moo, you want to be able to explain the truth and then send them reliable information if they're interested in hearing more. And you don't have to do this in a way that's confrontational. It can be like, I wonder where you heard that. Where'd you hear that thing that you're saying is true? And if their answer to that is InfoWars, then you know that they're in a disinformation bubble. All right. So again, really critical at this point to find reliable sources and rely on them, right? And not to take word of mouth or far right wing sources as fact. Okay. All right, that's it for today. Quick notification for everybody who wasn't here last week. Next week, the broadcast is on vacation because I am on vacation and our whole staff is taking the week off. So I am here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, regular time. There will be a bonus broadcast for our Patreon subscribers on Friday afternoon as usual. But next week, there will only be an educational video on Monday. There will be no live broadcast. Those of you who are new here may not know that we do this a couple of times a year. This is like a full staff out for us here at the Gaia Leadership Project next week. No training classes for those of you who are in them, no live calls for those of you who are in the Ripple Effect Institute, and no live broadcasts on YouTube. So we will be taking our, biannual break, and you all will be okay. And I will probably be trying to stay off social media during that window as well, because I'm really trying to get a break with my kids. And then we will be back the following week on regular schedule. But for this week, everything is as usual. So I will catch you all here tomorrow through Friday. Please don't forget to thumbs up this broadcast. Don't forget to subscribe here. Hit that bell notification so you know when I go live. And if you're watching after the fact, drop me a comment. Let me know how you're doing. It tells the algorithm you like what we're up to here. And please don't forget to share this broadcast with your friends. Lastly, I do just want to mention that our free guide on how to create change in this era is available for download. It's already in the show notes. I will add it to the comments. And as we get closer into the fall, I am going to talk just a little bit about the Ripple Effect Institute and what's happening inside it right now, because it's freaking amazing and you should join us. All right, that's it. I will catch you all here live tomorrow. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.